What's going on, everybody? We're headed to the facility for day 2 of our winter workouts. It's a beautiful snowy day, as you can see out there. Nice little snowy day here. It's like 31 degrees out, I think. So we'll have a full day of infield workouts again today. And on the ride, got a question yesterday, so I figured I'd answer it today. A couple players were talking at practice about what it's like to be a college baseball player. Now they were talking specifically about Division One and what the schedule is like. So I want to break down what a typical Division One college baseball schedule looks like as far as what's your normal routine going to be each day. Now, depending on what division you play in, there are different rules. So if you play in D3, typically you're not able to do as much as D1. If you play maybe JUCO or NAIA, you can kind of do whatever the hell you want. But we're going to talk D1 to give you an example. Since I played at Wake Forest for 3 years and then I coached at Wake Forest 10 years after that, and the schedule was pretty much the same when I came back. So this is going to be your normal schedule. We'll talk about the fall first. The spring is very similar. You're just going to play more games. In the fall, it's just basically practices. You are allowed to play a couple of scrimmage games against other teams, but that's really the only difference. So let's start. My freshman year, we had 6 a.m. lifts. Now, some people still do that. Thankfully, we got rid of that after my freshman year, and we went to lifts after practice. But freshman year, it was up at 5:30, and you had to be down, ready to lift at 6 a.m. So we would lift from, say, 6 to 7:15-ish or so, maybe get out of there around 7:30, go back, take a quick shower, and then you head to class. Typically, classes for us at Wake Forest, my classes usually started right around like 9 o'clock is when most of my classes were. So I would take class from 9 to 1-ish. And this was the typical schedule. They wanted us out of class right around 1 o'clock because once you get out at 1 o'clock, you're going to go and eat lunch. And then you'll eat lunch till probably 2, and then you head right to the field. Our practices started at 3 o'clock, so I would get to the field around 2, get changed, and then I would try to do some early work. So you might go in the cage and do some work in there. Maybe you get some extra fielding work in. And then team practice starts at 3. Typically, team practice was 2.5 to 3 hours. So you practice until, say, 5:30 or 6 o'clock, right around there. After that, now you're hungry again. You're going to go eat dinner at 6 o'clock. So you get there at 6:30. Eat until about 7:30 or so. Now, we had to do study hall because it's called Wake Forest, but really we called it Work Forest because they give you a ton of work. So maybe if you go to an academic school that's maybe not the greatest, maybe you don't have to do this, but we'd have to go to study hall because we got a ton of homework. And so freshman year, I was there every single night. Now, as my grades improved and as you get older, you didn't have to go as much, but you still got to do your homework. So whether you're doing it at study hall and you have a tutor helping you, or you're doing it on your own, you're still doing homework. So you're probably getting in there around 8 o'clock or so, and I would say on average you got a couple of hours of work. So let's say you finish around 10, 10:30, somewhere around there. Well, now if you got another lift at 6 a.m., I mean, I guess you can go out if you want, but most of us had to go back, go to sleep because you got to wake up at 5:30. Now, when I got to sophomore year, we changed the schedule a little bit, thankfully, where we didn't have morning lifts, and instead we had lift after practice. So you'd finish practice around like 6 o'clock-ish, 5:30, 6 o'clock-ish, and then you would go lift, and then you go to dinner, and then you just do your homework later. So you'd still have to do your homework, and you'd finish later. So you still kind of had to go to bed because you had to get up for school. So that was our typical schedule. We did that 6 days a week. You get 1 day off, but you're still going to school. On that, usually that we'd take a Monday off, but you still got to go to class, still got to do homework, you still got to do all that stuff. And what I just listed is like the bare minimum. Now, if you're playing at a Division One school, and especially if you're playing at a Power Four school, if you're playing at Wake Forest, like you're trying to get in the lineup, so you got to do even more. So there's plenty of times where I'd go back to the facility late at night and hit more. You got to do stuff on your own, right? So that's a busy schedule, and not everyone realizes that. And you have to do that day after day after day. Now, in the fall's about almost 2 months or so, and then you get a little bit of a break where you do what's called individuals, where you do small group practices, so it's not team practices. You're usually there with a few players. But then once you get back in the spring, you're right back to team practice, and then the season starts up, and you got multiple months of games. You're playing about 60-something games or so, and your season. And now you're adding travel in. So you're traveling on the weekends typically to your road games. Sometimes you're traveling, you don't go super far during the week, but you're on a bus and you're traveling. So you got to be really, really committed if you want to play any level of college baseball. But if you want to play Division I college baseball, you got to be really committed. And so you got to look at, if you're a high school player, you got to look at what you're doing right now, and you got to start building basically your commitment muscles. Because if you walk into college and you're not used to that type of schedule, that's going to be a shock for you. That's a lot. Again, for me, luckily, my high school schedule set me up really well for playing in college because I played 3 sports in high school. And so that was my typical day. I'd get up at 7 a.m., get ready for school, get to school, start school at 8:15, get out of school at 2:30, go right to practice until 5, go to the gym and lift until 6:30, come home, eat dinner till 7:30, and then I went to a pretty good high school where we had to do homework. It had to do a good amount of it, a couple hours a night. By the time you're done with that, it's 10 o'clock, and now you got to go to bed and get up and do it again tomorrow. And I did that for 4 years, so that really trained me. So look at your schedule. And I'll say this, the good thing is if you aren't committed and you don't have a schedule anywhere close to that, and you just, go to class and you go home and you play Fortnite all day long, and you're not doing extra hitting and you're not practicing and you're not lifting and you're not doing all that stuff, well, chances are you're probably not going to be good enough to play at that level anyway. But hopefully this gives you some insight, and look at your schedule. And if you really want to play at that level, first, I think it's good to know what it takes, because that's not for everybody. That schedule is definitely not for everyone. You got to be really, really in the baseball. You got to be really, really committed to being the best player you can be. And you got to be willing to make some sacrifices, because you're going to see your friends when you go to practice and you go to lift and you wake up early and you got to do extra work and you do all that stuff, and you see all your buddies that aren't athletes that are all going out and having a good time. I'm not saying you can't go out ever in college, because you can. There's just not a lot of time. That can't be your priority. You can really only have two priorities in college. This is what I always say. So baseball's got to be one, and school's got to be two, and then social life is got to be three. If you move social life to two or to one, you move it to one, forget about it. You got no chance. You move it to two, well, you're going to either fail in the baseball field or you're going to fail in the classroom at most schools. So it's got to be three, and it ends up being a little part of three. And if you don't want that to be three, well, you're going to either struggle or don't try to play a sport in college, or go to a place where it's not going to be demanding. Definitely don't go to a Division I school. I know that much. So hopefully that helps you out, gives you a little insight. People were talking about it yesterday. Wanted to give my thoughts on it. That's all I got. I just pulled in the practice, so we're going to go rock and roll. We'll talk to you later.